In the scriptural justice system, the highest authority, the Most High Yah, is the judge and the jury. The seed of Israel are his children. These are their stories. Season 1, Episode 5. The Arab Slave Trade. Sources Comprehensive Source List. Episode 5. Primary Biblical Foundation. 1. Deuteronomy 28:68. KJV, beginning of the ship curse. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. Egypt, house of bondage. Exodus 22. Arab slave trade equals first major fulfillment via ships to house across Indian Ocean and Red Sea. Transatlantic trade, episode 7, equals second and ultimate fulfillment. 2. Deuteronomy 28:64 KJV, sold to enemies. And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people, from the one end of the earth even unto the other end of the earth. Arab Islamic traders equals enemies who purchased and enslaved scattered Israelites. 3. Deuteronomy 28:32-41 KJV. Children taken, thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people. Arab slave trade specifically targeted children and young people. Overview. The forgotten slave trade. 4. Timeline and scale. Duration, 7th century, 640s AD, to 1960s, 1970s. Length, over 1,300 years, compared to 400 years transatlantic. Volume. Conservative estimates, 17 to 20 million Africans. High estimates, some scholars suggest 30+ million. Mortality, extremely high due to castration, desert crossings, harsh conditions. Why it's forgotten. No large Afro-Arab populations today. Systematic castration prevented reproduction. Arab Islamic nations have not acknowledged or apologized. No reparations discussions. Western focus on transatlantic trade overshadows this longer, equally brutal trade. Comprehensive academic sources. 5. Murray Gordon, Slavery in the Arab World, New Amsterdam Books, 1989. Most accessible comprehensive overview. Documents, Roots, Med-Scale Timeline. Chapter on castration practices. Explains why there are no large Afro-Arab populations today. Highly recommended primary academic source. 6. Bernard Lewis, Race and Slavery in the Middle East, An Historical Inquiry, Oxford University Press, 1990, definitive scholarly work by renowned historian, examines Islamic legal framework for slavery, documents attitudes toward Africans in Arab Islamic societies, discusses Quranic and Hadith sources permitting slavery, chapter on eunuchs and castration, critical academic source. 7. William Jervis Clarence Smith, Islam and the Abolition of Slavery, Oxford University Press, 2006. Scholarly analysis of why Islamic world was last to abolish slavery. Religious justifications examined. Documents resistance to abolition. Case studies, Ottoman Empire, Arabia, East Africa. Shows religious barriers to abolition. 8. Paul E. Lovejoy, Transformations in Slavery, A History of Slavery in Africa, Cambridge University Press, 3rd edition, 2012. Comprehensive work on all African slave trades, Chapter 3. The Organization of the Slave Trade in West Africa, 1000 to 1800. Chapter 4. The Enslavement of Africans, 1600 to 1800. Documents Arab, Islamic trade alongside transatlantic, statistical estimates, essential academic reference. 9. Ehud R. Toledano, Slavery and Abolition in the Ottoman Middle East, University of Washington Press, 1998. Focus on Ottoman Empire, largest Islamic state. Documents slavery from 16th to 20th centuries, primary source analysis. Explains late abolition, 1920s Turkey, officially. 10. Ehud R. Toledano, As If Silent and Absent, Bonds of Enslavement in the Islamic Middle East, Yale University Press, 2007. Theoretical Framework for Understanding Islamic Slavery, How it Differed from and Resembled Western Slavery. Focus on erasure and silence around the trade. Islamic Legal Framework. Slavery Permitted, 11. Quranic verses permitting slavery, Surah 16:71 An-Nahl, and Allah has favored some of you over others in provision. But those who were favored would not hand over their provision to those whom their right hands possess, so they would be equal to them therein. Those whom their right hands possess equal slaves. Surah 23:6 Al-Mu'minun, except from their wives or those their right hands possess, for indeed they will not be blamed. Context. Permits sexual relations with slaves. Surah 70, 29-30, Al-Ma'arij. And those who guard their private parts, except from their wives or those their right hands possess, for indeed they are not to be blamed. Reiterates permission. Surah 4, 3, An-Nisa. And if you fear that you will not deal justly with the orphan girls, then marry those that please you of other women, 2 or 3 or 4. But if you fear that you will not be just, then marry only one or those your right hands possess. Slaves as alternative to marriage. Surah 33:50 Al-Ahzab, specifically for the Prophet, O Prophet, indeed we have made lawful to you your wives and those your right hand possesses from what Allah has returned to you of captives. Captives of war equals permissible slaves. 12. Hadith sources on slavery, Sahih Bukhari. Multiple hadith documenting Muhammad owning slaves. Volume 3, Book 34, number 351, describes slave sales. Volume 7, Book 62, number 137, describes freeing and marrying a slave woman. Available multiple translations online and in print. Sahih Muslim, similar documentation, Book 10, number 3901, on slave transactions, available, multiple translations. 13. Islamic legal opinions, fiqh. Traditional Islamic jurisprudence permits slavery of non-Muslims captured in war, children of slaves born into slavery, non-Muslims purchased from legitimate markets. Sources prohibiting enslavement of Muslims, hadith. No Arab should enslave another Arab. However, convert status debated, converted slaves be freed, varied by school of thought. Academic analysis. Kichia Ali, Slavery and Sexual Ethics in Islam in Slavery and Abolition, Vol. 27, number 2, 2006. Jonathan A.C. Brown, Slavery and Islam, One World Publications, 2019. Controversial book. Defends Islamic slavery as distinct from Western chattel slavery, useful for understanding traditional Islamic legal justifications. Schlapp Routes of the Arab Slave Trade, 14. 3 main routes. Trans-Saharan route. West, Central Africa, North Africa. Across Sahara Desert, destinations Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, then to Middle East. Duration 7th century, 19th century. Estimated volume 9 to 14 million over 1,200 years. Red Sea route, Horn of Africa, Somalia, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Djibouti, Arabian Peninsula. Across Red Sea by dhow, Arab sailing vessel. Destinations Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Hijaz, Mecca, Medina, Jeddah. Duration 7th century, 1960s, estimated volume 3 to 4 million. Indian Ocean route. East Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, Zanzibar, Middle East Asia. Zanzibar equals major slave hub. Sultan of Oman controlled it. Destinations Oman, Persian Gulf, UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, Persia, Iran, India. Duration 8th century, 1890s. Zanzibar market closed 1873, but trade continued. Estimated volume 5 to 8 million. Ralph A. Austin. The Trans-Saharan Slave Trade, a Tentative Census. In the Uncommon Market, Essays in the Economic History of the Atlantic Slave Trade. Academic Press, 1979. Statistical Analysis of Trans-Saharan Trade, estimates 9.4 million transported over 200 years. Methodology, trade records, customs documents, traveller accounts. 16. Ralph A. Austin, Trans-Saharan Africa in World History. Oxford University Press, 2010. Broader context of Saharan trade networks. Slavery as one commodity among many. Gold, salt, ivory. Routes and infrastructure. Trans-Saharan route, details, 17. Departure points in Africa. West Africa, Timbuktu, Mali, Gao, Mali, Kano, Nigeria, Hausa States, Central Africa, Chad Basin, Kanem Bornu Empire. Origin regions, modern-day Mali, Niger, Nigeria, Chad, Cameroon, Central African Republic. 18. Desert crossing, distance 1,000 to 2,000 plus miles depending on route, duration 2 to 3 months minimum, often longer. Mortality rate, estimated 2 died for every 1 who reached North Africa. Causes of death, dehydration, starvation, exhaustion, exposure, abandoned if too weak. 19. Caravan structure, led by Arab Berber traders. Enslaved people chained together in coffles, walked entire distance, no carts across desert, limited water, minimal food. Those who couldn't keep pace were left to die. 20. Major desert routes. Western route, Timbuktu, Tagaza, salt mines, Sijil Massa, Morocco. Central route, Kano, Agadez, Gadames, Tripoli, Libya. Eastern route, Chad, Fezzan, Tripoli, Egypt. Sources, Beauville, E.W. The Golden Trade of the Moors. Oxford University Press, 1958, revised 1995. Classic work on trans-Saharan trade. Documents routes, methods, goods including slaves. Wright, John, The Trans-Saharan Slave Trade, Routledge, 2007. Focus specifically on slave component of trade. Section 4 of 7. Now Red Sea route details 21. Departure points. Horn of Africa. Xyla, Somalia. Berber, Massawa, Eritrea, Tajura, Djibouti. Origin regions. Ethiopia, Abyssinia. Somalia, Eritrea, Djibouti. Southern Egypt, Sudan. 22. Method of transport. Dhows, Arab sailing vessels, seasonal, dependent on monsoon winds. June-September, southwest monsoon, Africa to Arabia. December-March, northeast monsoon, Arabia to Africa. 23. Journey conditions, duration 1 to 2 weeks across Red Sea. Conditions cramped, unsanitary, minimal provisions. Enslaved people packed below deck. Many died from disease, dehydration, drowning if storms, thrown overboard if sick. 24 destinations. Yemen, Mocha, Aden, Al-Hudaydah, major ports. Saudi Arabia, Hijaz, Jeddah, main port for Mecca, Medina. Egypt, via Suez region. Sources, Beachy R.W., The Slave Trade of Eastern Africa, Rex Collings, 1976. Comprehensive Study of East African Trade. Documents, Red Sea and Indian Ocean routes. Sheriff Abdul, Slaves, Spices and Ivory in Zanzibar, James Curry, 1987. Classic work on Zanzibar slave trade, connects to Red Sea routes. The Indian Ocean Route, Zanzibar Hub, 25. Zanzibar, the epicenter. Historical background. Island off coast of Tanzania, controlled by Sultan of Oman from 1698 to 1856. Sultan Said bin Sultan moved capital from Muscat, Oman, to Zanzibar, 1840. Became largest slave trading port in East Africa. Scale estimated 600,000 to 1 million enslaved Africans passed through Zanzibar, conservative estimates. Peak period, 1820s to 1873. 1873, Zanzibar slave market officially closed under British pressure, but trade continued covertly. 26. Robin Law, Uida. The Social History of a West African Slaving Port, 1727 to 1892, Ohio University Press, 2004. While focused on West Africa, Uida provides comparative context. Methodology applicable to understanding Zanzibar operations, 27. Abdul Sherif, Slaves, Spices and Ivory in Zanzibar, Integration of an East African Commercial Empire into the World Economy, 1770 to 1873, James Curry, 1987. Definitive work on Zanzibar slave trade. Economic analysis, Zanzibar's economy, dependent on slavery. Documents, plantation slavery on Zanzibar. And export slave trade. Primary sources, Omani, British, French records. 28. Frederick Cooper, Plantation Slavery on the East Coast of Africa, Yale University Press, 1977. Documents plantation system in Zanzibar and East African coast. Clove plantations worked by enslaved Africans. Export of slaves to Arabia, Persia, India, 29. Zanzibar slave market site. Located in Stonetown, Zanzibar, underground chambers where enslaved people held before sale. Described as dark, airless, cramped. 75-plus people packed in spaces meant for 10 to 15 seasoning process breaking spirits before sale. Now a museum and UNESCO site. 30. Edward Alpers, Ivory and Slaves in East Central Africa, University of California Press, 1975. Documents interior African sources of slaves. How caravan routes brought captives from interior, modern-day Malawi, Zambia, Congo to coast, connection to. Destinations, Middle East and beyond, 31. Arabian Peninsula, Saudi Arabia, Hijaz, Mecca, Medina, Jeddah, Taif. Enslaved Africans used as domestic servants, laborers, concubines, eunuchs. Slavery legal until 1962, Saudi Arabia. Yemen, major ports, Mocha, Aden, Al-Hudaydah. Enslaved Africans worked in agriculture, domestic service, ports. Afro-Yemeni population today, Mahamasheen Akdam's descendants, but marginalized. Oman, Sultan-controlled Zanzibar, ran slave trade as state enterprise. Enslaved Africans in pearl diving, domestic service, date plantations. Slavery legal until 1970. Oman last country to officially abolish. 32. Persian Gulf states, UAE, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Sharjah. Enslaved Africans used primarily for pearl diving, brutal, deadly work. Before oil, pearling was the economy. Divers dove 30 to 50 feet, 1 to 2 minutes per dive, 10 to 12 hours day. Mortality rate, 10 to 15% per season from drowning, sharks, lung damage. Bahrain, largest pearling centre, estimated 15,000 to 20,000 divers at peak, late 1800s, early 1900s, majority enslaved Africans. Qatar, Kuwait, similar pearl diving operations, enslaved African labour. Sources: J.G. Lorimer, Gazetteer of the Persian Gulf, Oman and Central Arabia, 1908 to 1915. British Colonial Intelligence Report, Detailed Documentation of Slavery in Gulf Region, Volume 2, pages 2225 to 2260. Slavery and Pearl Diving, Section 33. Iraq and Iran, Persia. Iraq, Mesopotamia, Zand Rebellion 869 to 883 D, made-major slave uprising in southern Iraq. Enslaved East Africans working salt marshes near Basra. Revolt lasted 14 years, nearly toppled Abbasid Caliphate. Will be covered in Season 2. Iran, Persia. Enslaved Africans used in domestic service, military, ghulams, agricultural labour. Qajar dynasty, 1789 to 1925. Documented use of African slaves and eunuchs. Photographs exist from late 1800s showing African slaves in Persian court. Sources: Alexandra Popovic, The Revolt of African Slaves in Iraq in the 3rd–9th Century, Marcus Wiener Publishers, 1999. Definitive work on Zanj Rebellion, Benaz Mirzai, A History of Slavery and Emancipation in Iran, 1800 to 1929, University of Texas Press, 2017, Comprehensive Study of Iranian Slavery. 34. Ottoman Empire, Turkey, largest Islamic empire, enslaved Africans brought via North Africa, Egypt, Red Sea, Persian Gulf. Used in domestic service, military. Janissaries included Africans, eunuchs, labour. Major slave markets: Istanbul, Izmir, Cairo, Damascus. Slavery legal until 1924, Turkey after Ottoman Empire collapse. Sources: Ehud R. Toledano, The Ottoman Slave Trade and Its Suppression, 1840 to 1890, Princeton, 1982. Y. Hakan Erdem, Slavery in the Ottoman Empire and Its Demise, 1800–1909, Palgrave Macmillan, 1996. 35. Egypt, hub connecting trans-Saharan and Red Sea routes. Egyptian military, Mamluks included enslaved soldiers. Domestic slavery widespread, Cairo, major slave market. Sources: Gabriel Bayer, Slavery in 19th Century Egypt in Journal of African History, Volume 8, No. 3, 1967. Eve Trout Powell, A Different Shade of Colonialism, Egypt, Great Britain, and the Mastery of the Sudan, University of California Press, 2003. 36. North Africa, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya. Both destinations and transit points, enslaved Africans worked in agriculture, domestic service, military, construction. Some stayed, some sold onward to Middle East. 37. India, Siddhis, Afro-Indian community descended from enslaved Africans, brought via Indian Ocean route, Zanzibar, Western India. Settled primarily in Gujarat, Karnataka, Goa, Hyderabad. Some served in military, others domestic labour. Today, 250,000 to 850,000 Siddhis in India, marginalised. Sources: Shanti Sadiq Ali, The African Dispersal in the Deccan, From Medieval to Modern Times, Orient Longman, 1996, Amy Catlin, Jaira's Boy and Edward A. Alpers, eds. Siddhis and Scholars, Essays on African Indians, Rainbow Publishers, 2004. Halocastration, The Ultimate Erasure, 38. Systematic castration of males. Purpose: create eunuchs for harem guards, palace servants, religious sites, Mecca, Medina, prevent reproduction, no descendants, control population, higher sale prices for eunuchs. Locations: Upper Egypt, Coptic Christian monasteries, primary castration centres, Sudan, some operations, Ethiopia, some operations, performed before sale to Arab markets. 39. Procedure and mortality. Method: complete castration, removal of testicles and penis for palace eunuchs. Partial castration, testicles only, less common. Mortality rate: 60 to 80% died from infection, blood loss, shock. Meaning, for every 10 boys castrated, 6 to 8 died. Survivors sold at premium prices, 3 to 5x normal slave price. Post-operative: no anesthesia, medieval early modern period, cauterization with hot oil or iron, high infection rate. Permanent health complications for survivors, 40. Sources on castration: Murray Gordon, Slavery in the Arab World, 1989, Chapter 5, The Eunuch, detailed description of castration practices, explains why no large Afro-Arab populations today. Primary source citations. Bernard Lewis, Race and Slavery in the Middle East, 1990, Chapter 1, Slavery, section on eunuchs, religious and social functions. Terence Walls, Black Slavery in Egypt during the 19th century as reflected in the Mahkama archives of Cairo. In Slavery in the Islamic Middle East, New Amsterdam Books, 1999. Primary source research from Egyptian court records, documents castration operations, prices, mortality. 40. Why castration? Religious justification. Eunuchs could guard harems without temptation. Islamic law required separation of sexes. Service in holy sites, Mecca, Medina. Eunuchs supervised women's sections. Economic, higher prices, eunuchs luxury commodity. Prevented reproduction, no generational slave populations to manage. Social control. Eunuchs dependent on masters for life, no family, no heirs, less likely to rebel. Socially isolated, easier to control. Mortality and scale, 42. Overall mortality estimates, trans-Saharan route, 2 died for every 1 who reached North Africa, desert crossing. Estimated 18 to 28 million captured, estimated 9 to 14 million reached destination. Red Sea, Indian Ocean route, 1 in 3 to 4 died during transport, Dow conditions, drowning, disease. Post-arrival, castration, 60 to 80% mortality, high death rates in first years of enslavement, dangerous work, pearl diving, mining, heavy labor, 43. Why no large Afro-Arab populations? Compared to America's, transatlantic, 10.7 million arrived, today 200+ million descendants. Arab trade, 17 to 30 million over 1,300 years, today small marginalized communities. Reasons: 1. Castration prevented reproduction. 2. Concubinage, women absorbed into households, children often took father's ethnicity. 3. High mortality, brutal conditions, short lifespans. 4. No plantation economy, no large concentrations where they could form communities. 5. Social dispersion, scattered as domestic servants, isolated babbled. 6. Absence of abolition movement, no recognition, no records, no descendants to preserve memory. Sources: Murray Gordon, Slavery in the Arab World, 1989, Chapter 9, Abolition Without Enforcement. Bernard Lewis, Race and Slavery in the Middle East, 1990, Introduction. British Efforts to Suppress, Limited, 44, 19th Century British Anti-Slavery Patrols, Royal Navy Patrols, 1860s to 1890s, British Navy intercepted dhows in Indian Ocean, Red Sea, Anti-Slavery Squadron, similar to Atlantic patrols but smaller scale, freed some captives but trade continued. Diplomatic pressure, Britain pressured, Sultan of Zanzibar, Ottoman Empire, Persian Gulf rulers, 1873. Sultan of Zanzibar signs treaty closing Zanzibar slave market, British pressure, 1890s. Various treaties with Gulf rulers to limit slave trade, but enforcement was weak. Slavery continued covertly. 45. Sources on British suppression efforts. Suzanne Mears, Britain and the Ending of the Slave Trade, Longman, 1975. Documents British efforts in Middle East and Africa, shows limitations and compromises. R.W. Beechey, The Slave Trade of Eastern Africa, 1976, chapter on British suppression efforts, documents, treaties, naval patrols, diplomatic records. British parliamentary papers, multiple reports on slavery in Zanzibar, Persian Gulf, Ottoman Empire. Available British Library, National Archives. Example, correspondence respecting the slave trade in Zanzibar, 1871 to 1873. Late abolition in Islamic world, 46. Timeline of official abolition. Tunisia, 1846. First Arab state under French pressure. Ottoman Empire, gradual restrictions, 1800s. Officially 1908, abolished slave trade. 1924, Turkey abolished slavery after empire collapse. Egypt, 1895, under British control. Iran, 1929, Pahlavi dynasty. Iraq, 1924, British mandate. Saudi Arabia, 1962, under international pressure. Yemen, 1962, North Yemen. 1967, South Yemen under British. Oman, 1970, last country to officially abolish. Mauritania, 1981 officially, but reports of continued slavery, 47. Why so late? Religious justification, slavery permitted in Quran and Hadith, challenging slavery, challenging Islamic law, Sharia. Religious scholars, ulama, resisted abolition. Economic dependence. Economies relied on slave labor, pearling, agriculture, domestic service. Elites owned slaves, resisted loss of property. Lack of internal pressure. No abolitionist movement within Islamic societies, unlike West. Enslaved populations couldn't organize, dispersed, castrated, isolated. External pressure. Required. Britain forced most abolitions via colonialism, treaties, economic pressure. Post-World War II, UN, international pressure finally ended legal slavery. Sources: William G. Clarence Smith, Islam and the Abolition of Slavery, Oxford, 2006. Comprehensive Analysis of Late Abolition, Bernard Lewis, Race and Slavery in the Middle East, 1990, Chapter 6, Abolition. Modern Continuation, Informal Slavery, 48. Post-abolition slavery continues. Mauritania, abolished 1981, criminalized 2007, still persists. Estimates 90,000 to 600,000 in slavery, slave-like conditions. Hereditary slavery born into bondage. Walk Free Foundation reports ongoing slavery. Gulf states, kafala system, sponsorship system for migrant workers, passports confiscated by employers, cannot change jobs or leave country without permission. If they flee, equals arrested for absconding. Effectively, modern slavery primarily affects workers from Ethiopia, Kenya, India, Philippines, Bangladesh. Sources: Human Rights Watch. Multiple reports on Gulf labor abuses, International Labour Organization, ILO. Forced labor in the Gulf, various reports. Walk Free Foundation, Global Slavery Index Annual, Hebrew-Israelite Connection. 49. Connecting to Deuteronomy 28, evidence Hebrews were among the enslaved. 1. Geographic origin. Episode 3 proved Hebrews scattered into North and East Africa after 70 AD and 135 AD. Episode 4 showed migration into African interior over centuries. Arab slave trade captured from Horn of Africa, Ethiopia, Somalia, Beta Israel region, East Africa, Swahili coast, West Africa, where Hebrew communities documented. 2. Timeline. Arab trade began 7th century, 640 AD. Hebrews had been in Africa 500 plus years by then, since 70 to 135 A diaspora. Hebrew bloodlines mixed into African populations. When Arabs captured Africans, they were capturing descendants of scattered Israelites. 3. DNA evidence from episode 4. Lemba, Southern Africa, proven Hebrew ancestry via Cohen modal haplotype, Beta Israel, Ethiopia, proven Middle Eastern ancestry. These communities were in regions targeted by Arab slave trade. 4. Prophecy fulfillment. Deut 28:68, sold unto your enemies. Arabs, Muslims enemies, not the covenant people. Bondmen and bondwomen, cooks male and female slaves, with ships, dhows across Red Sea and Indian Ocean, into Egypt again, back into bondage. Egypt, house of bondage. 50. Arab slave trade, first wave of ship curse, 7th and 19th centuries, scattered Israelites sold via ships as to Middle East. 15th and 19th centuries, scattered Israelites sold via ships, European vessels, to Americas. Prophecy fulfilled in 2 waves, both involving ships. Prophecy fulfillment chart. 51. Matching Deuteronomy 28 to Arab slave trade. Deuteronomy 28 curse, Arab slave trade, fulfillment. Verse 68, sold unto your enemies. Arabs, Muslims enslaved, Hebrews scattered in Africa. Verse 68, with ships, dhows across Red Sea, Indian Ocean, into Egypt again, returned to slavery after brief freedom. Verse 32:41, children taken, targeted young people, especially boys, for castration. Scattered among all people, sold to Arabia, Persia, Ottoman Empire, India, every direction. Verse 37, byword among nations, enslaved, mocked, dehumanized. Verse 48, yoke of iron, chains, shackles, brutal labor. Counter-arguments addressed. 52. How do you know Hebrews were among those enslaved? Response. Episodes 3 to 4 proved Hebrews scattered into Africa after 70 AD, 135 AD. DNA evidence, Lemba, Beta Israel, confirms Hebrew presence in Africa. Arab slave trade captured from exact regions where Hebrews had settled. Over 600 plus years, Hebrew bloodlines mixed into African populations. When Arabs enslaved Africans, they were enslaving Hebrew descendants. 53. This is just coincidence, not prophecy. Response. Deuteronomy 28:68 specifically mentions ships. Arab trade used ships, dhows. Transatlantic trade also used ships, larger vessels. No other ancient prophecy predicted enslavement via ships. Specific to children of Israel. Fulfilled precisely as stated. 54. Why don't Arab nations have large Hebrew descendant populations? Response. Systematic castration, 60 to 80% mortality. Survivors couldn't reproduce. Concubinage, children absorbed into Arab ethnicity. High mortality rates, brutal conditions, short lifespans. Geographic dispersion, isolated as domestic servants. This is why the trade is forgotten. No descendants to remember. This is proof of deliberate erasure. 55. The Quran permits slavery, so it's not wrong. Response. This episode documents what happened, not debates Islamic theology. Prophecy said Israelites would be sold unto enemies. Whether slavery was legal in Islam is irrelevant to prophetic fulfillment. The fact is, it happened exactly as prophesied. The children of Israel were scattered, captured, and sold for 1,300 years. Travelers' accounts, primary sources, 56. Richard Burton, Personal Narrative of a Pilgrimage to Al-Madinah and Mecca, 1855 to 1856. British explorer travelled to Mecca disguised as Afghan pilgrim. Eyewitness account of slavery in Hijaz, Saudi Arabia. Describes slave markets in Jeddah, enslaved Africans in Mecca, Medina. Documents, prices, conditions, casual acceptance of slavery. Available, multiple editions, public domain. 57. Charles Doughty, Travels in Arabia Deserter, 1888. British explorer, travelled through Arabia, 1876 to 1878. 2-volume work. Documents, Slavery in Arabian Peninsula, Treatment of Enslaved Africans. Available, multiple editions, 58. Gerhard Rolf's Adventures in Morocco, 1874, and other works. German explorer, travelled through North Africa. Documented trans-Saharan slave trade, caravan routes, conditions. Eyewitness to slave coffles. 59. Heinrich Barth, Travels and Discoveries in North and Central Africa, 1857 to 1858. German explorer, 5-year journey, 1850 to 1855. Documented slave trade in Timbuktu region, trans-Saharan routes. Primary source for West African connections. 60. David Livingstone, Missionary Travels and Researches in South Africa, 1857. Scottish missionary explorer. Documented Arab slave trade in East, Central Africa. Witnessed slave raids, caravans, brutality. His reports influenced British anti-slavery efforts. Available, multiple editions, public domain. 61. Henry Morton Stanley, Through the Dark Continent, 1878. Journalist, explorer. Documented Arab slave trade in Congo Basin, Great Lakes region. Witnessed Tipu Tip's slave operations, Arab Swahili slave trader. Available, multiple editions. Swahili slave traders, documented 62. Tipu Tip, Hamad bin Muhammad bin Juma bin Rajab el-Majebi, most notorious Arab Swahili slave trader in East Africa. Operated 1860s to 1890s. Based in Zanzibar, controlled vast interior territory, modern-day Congo. Enslaved tens of thousands. Worked with Stanley, Livingstone, complicated relationships. Eventually made governor by King Leopold II of Belgium. Sources, Tipu Tip's autobiography, Maisha Yahamed bin Mohammed el-Mujebi, Tipu Tip, 1902 to 1905, published 1958 to 1959. His own account, translated from Swahili, defends his actions but documents scale of operations. Alpers, Edward A., The Story of Swimmer, Female Vulnerability in 19th Century East Africa, in Women and Slavery in Africa, University of Wisconsin Press, 1983, 63. Other notable slave traders, Al-Zubair Mansour, Sudanese slave trader operated in Sudan, Chad, 1850s to 1880s. Various Omani Arab merchants controlling Zanzibar trade. Visual evidence, photographs, 64. 19th early 20th century photographs, Zanzibar slave market. Photographs exist from 1860s to 1890s showing enslaved people in chains, market structures, British naval officers with freed captives. Available, British Library, Smithsonian, various online archives. Gulf region photographs, 1900s to 1920s, showing pearl diving operations, formerly enslaved workers. Available, Lorimer's Gazetteer includes some images. Ottoman Empire photographs, late 1800s, showing African slaves, servants in Istanbul, Cairo, eunuchs in palace service. Available, various museum collections, Ottoman archives. Warning, many images are disturbing, show human suffering. Modern scholarship, recent works, 65. Ismail Musa Montana, The Abolition of Slavery in Ottoman Tunisia, University Press of Florida, 2013. Detailed study of abolition process in one Arab state, shows resistance to abolition. 66. Eve Trout Powell, Tell This in My Memory, Stories of Enslavement from Egypt, Sudan, and the Ottoman Empire, Stanford University Press, 2012. Oral histories and testimonies, rare first-person accounts from formerly enslaved people, 67. Terence Walls and Kenneth M. Cuno, eds. Race and Slavery in the Middle East, Histories of Trans-Saharan Africans in 19th Century Egypt, Sudan, and the Ottoman Mediterranean. American University in Cairo Press, 2010. Collection of scholarly essays, primary source research, connects multiple regions, 68. Matthew S. Hopper, Slaves of One Master, Globalization and Slavery in Arabia in the Age of Empire, Yale University Press, 2015. Recent scholarship on Gulf slavery. Archival research in British, French and Gulf archives documents resistance to abolition. 69. John Hunwick and Eve Trout Powell, editors, The African Diaspora in the Mediterranean Lands of Islam, Marcus Wiener Publishers, 2002. Comprehensive collection of primary sources, Arabic texts translated to English, documents spanning centuries. Statistical summaries, 70. Comparative scale, Arab versus transatlantic, factor, Arab slave trade, transatlantic slave trade, the E to English. Duration, 1,300 years, 1660s, 400 years, 1500s to 1860s. Volume, 17 to 30 million, estimates vary, 12.5 million embarked, 10.7 million arrived. Routes, Trans-Saharan, Red Sea, Indian Ocean, Atlantic Ocean. Destinations, Middle East, North Africa, India, Ottoman Empire, Americas, Caribbean. Mortality, transport, very high, 2/1 desert, 25 to 33% sea, 15%, Middle Passage. Castration, widespread, 60 to 80% died, rare, non-existent. Modern descendants, small marginalized communities, 200 plus million, Americas. Acknowledgement, minimal to none, extensive, museums, reparations, debates, etc. Sources for comparison, all sources cited above. Transatlantic Slave Trade Database, slavevoyages.org for transatlantic numbers. Haq language and terminology, 71. Arabic terms for enslaved Africans. Abdi, Arabic word for slave or servant, as in servant of God. In racial context came to mean specifically black slave. Abid, plural of abd used derogatorily for black Africans. Zanj, term for black Africans, especially from East Africa, root of Zanzibar, kadam, servant. Euphemism for slave, jaria, female slave or concubine. 72. Derogatory attitudes, documented. Medieval Arab geographers, historians described Africans in dehumanizing terms. Justified enslavement based on supposed inferiority, not universal. Some Islamic scholars opposed slavery or urged humane treatment. Sources: Bernard Lewis, Race and Slavery in the Middle East, 1990, Chapter 1. Documents racist attitudes in medieval Arabic literature. Ibn Khaldun, 14th century historian, among cited examples. Resistance and Rebellions, 73 Zanj Rebellion, 869 to 883 AD, Major Uprising, covered in detail in Season 2, Episode 3, already created. Briefly, enslaved East Africans in southern Iraq, Basra region, working salt marshes in horrific conditions, revolted under Ali ibn Muhammad, held territory for 14 years, built capital city al-Muqtara, nearly toppled Abbasid Caliphate, eventually crushed but proved resistance was constant. 74. Other rebellions, less documented. Various slave revolts in Morocco, medieval period. Uprisings in Ottoman Empire, sporadically documented. Most resistance unrecorded. Oral histories lost, no descendants to preserve memory. Escape and marronage. Some enslaved escaped to mountains, Morocco, Yemen. Desert oases, joined Bedouin tribes, less documented than New World maroon communities. Abolition efforts, why they failed for so long. 76. Internal resistance to abolition. Religious scholars ulama defended slavery as Quran permitted, Prophet practiced, economic elites resisted loss of property, pearling and agriculture depended on slaves. No internal abolitionist movement, unlike the West. Enslaved populations dispersed, castrated and silenced. 77. British pressure, limited success, focused more on Atlantic trade than Middle Eastern routes. Small dhows, vast distances made patrols ineffective. Political caution. Britain relied on Gulf rulers. Closed Zanzibar market, 1873, and pressured Saudi Arabia, 1962. Connection to Episode 7, Transatlantic, 78. Two waves of ship curse. First wave, Arab slave trade, Episode 5, 7th and 19th centuries. Hebrews scattered in Africa, captured and sold via dhows. Erasure through castration and assimilation. Second wave, Transatlantic slave trade, Episode 7, 15th and 19th centuries, descendants of same Hebrews captured and sold to Americas. Families destroyed but not erased, no castration, descendants survived. Both fulfill Deuteronomy 28 verse 68, with ships sold unto your enemies into Egypt again. 79. Why Episode 5 comes before Episode 7. Chronological. Arab trade began 600 plus years earlier. Prophetic. Same curse applied twice. Contextual, shows Hebrew bloodlines fully embedded in African populations by the time Europeans arrived. Episode 5, Key Evidence Summary. Provable facts. Arab slave trade lasted 1,300 plus years, 640s to 1960s, longer than transatlantic 400 years. 17 to 30 million Africans enslaved, conservative estimates. 3 routes trans-Saharan 9 to 14M, Red Sea 3-4, Indian Ocean 5 to 8M. Destinations: Arabia, Ottoman Empire, Persia, North Africa, India. Ships used equals dhows, fulfills Duke 2868. Systematic castration prevented descendants. Legal slavery persisted until 1970, Oman. Hebrews scattered in Africa. Episodes 3 to 4, captured and enslaved, Lemba plus Beta Israel. DNA prove Hebrew presence in target regions. Prophecy fulfilled, sold unto enemies with ships into Egypt again. The case: after scattering into Africa post-70 AD, Hebrew bloodlines spread through the continent. By the 7th century, Arab expansion began capturing those descendants, millions sold via the Sahara, Red Sea and Indian Ocean for 1,300 years. They were shipped in dhows, castrated, erased and forgotten. Deuteronomy 28:68 came to life, with ships sold unto your enemies into Egypt again. They came for them in ships. They sold them as slaves. They tried to erase them. The prophecy doesn't lie. All receipts collected. Episode 5, sourced. This is the longest, most brutal slave trade in human history, and it's been forgotten. But SLT is bringing the evidence.